Welcome to the JD Power Insurance Intelligence Podcast. I'm Michael Vermillion with JD Power, and with me today are Steve Crewdson from JD Power. Welcome, Steve.
Hi, Mike. Great to be back.
And I also have Craig Martin, also with JD Power. Craig, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
Hey, so the topic for today is customer service across channels, and this is different names over time, omni-channel and cross-channel and that kind of thing. But where we want to focus on specifically is kind of a newer term for us, at least in our research, and the term is seamless channel experience. And we're gonna really kind of double click on this and talk about why it's important and other aspects of it. But before we get there, Steve, I think it might be helpful just to start with a definition. So what do we mean by seamless? I went to the internet and picked up the Merriam-Webster definition of seamless, which the first definition is having no seams. Not surprising. But the second definition is having no awkward transitions, interruptions, or indications of disparity. So when we talk about a seamless channel experience, what do we mean by that?
Yeah, we definitely mean the second definition. There are no seams in the insurance experience, so to speak. So I'm going to give a little bit of historical background first. If you've been paying attention to our research for the last 25 years in the auto insurance industry, you know that we spent a lot of time 15, 20 years ago talking about how the industry was evolving from one where you would call your agent or walk into their agency. That was it if you had an agent. You might call your insurer, or you might just as likely be faxing your insurer documents. And this is back when we first started doing our work. And we saw digital channels emerging, websites. We saw later on mobile apps, texting emerging as a way to interact with your insurer. Your agent themselves could have an app or a website to interact with them. And the phrase omni-channel came about, where you want to be present in all of those channels. And what few were focused on early in this evolution was what we call now seamless. So just being present in every channel is kind of the beginning table stakes state to be in. Having capabilities across all the channels doesn't mean that your customer, when they interact with you, is having a good experience. What seamless really refers to is if I interact with my agent, or I interact with a contact center or a digital capability, and for one reason or another, I have to cross into a different channel, or maybe I just like to interact with you different ways and to get different answers. Am I getting an experience that isn't clunky across those channels, or the information I just shared with you recently in one channel isn't missing in a different channel? So we take, for instance, I spoke to an agent recently about changing my policy, and I log into my app a week later and the change isn't there. That's a clunky, as you described in that second definition of seamless. There's interruptions there in that experience. That's a not seamless experience. So we've moved beyond just being present across all channels, what you would call omni-channel, into now make sure that all those channels are working together, that it's not just a bunch of instruments playing different songs, that you're an orchestra playing one symphony.
So why are we talking about seamless now, Steve? Why is a seamless channel experience important?
Well, it turns out that we didn't know how important it would be. We added it to our auto insurance study questionnaire this year. We thought it sounds like a natural evolution from being omnichannel into the next level. We had no idea that it would end up being the most impactful key performance indicator. In other words, the biggest driver of customer satisfaction in the history of that study. We've been doing that work for 26 years. And this year, a seamless cross-channel interaction experience is more than 3 times as impactful as the next most impactful key performance indicator. So what does all that mean? Outside of the research verbiage, it means a customer on an auto insurance policy will rate their auto insurer much more so based on whether they're having seamless cross-channel experiences than on any other element of the experience. So insurers need to make sure that they're not just an omni-channel insurer anymore, that they're providing that orchestra playing a symphony type of experience where they're seamless interactions across channels. Their customer that interacts with them with an agent today, what they're talking about, or the call center today, shows up in the app, ideally immediately, but at least they're not looking a week later and saying, the information I just told you isn't there. What's going on?
So we want to get into some examples here in a minute of what good looks like and what bad looks like. Before we do that, just in the recent study, the research we published, Steve, are we actually seeing meaningful kind of material differences in performance across the industry by insurer when it comes to a seamless experience?
Yeah, we sure are. I think if you look across insurers, there's fewer than half of customers are saying they're having a seamless experience. There are some insurers who are doing just better than that, but there are some insurers who are doing quite lower than that too, or maybe a quarter or maybe a little bit more than that of their customers are saying they have a seamless experience across channels. So the industry as a whole, if you think about the average experience, has a long way to go to improving seamless interactions across channels. Some insurers are doing better, and there are some examples where they're doing quite poor. So there is some differentiation across insurers.
Okay, so seamless is important. The seam, uh, I want to use the word seems. It seems like there's also a big opportunity for the industry here. So why don't we double click on the concept and just kind of bring it to life? What does a good seamless experience look like? Just to kind of help illustrate what we're talking about.
I'll talk really quickly on that, and I know Craig's going to have a lot to offer here too. Craig's our expert on insurance agent experiences, but a good one, let's just bring the agent into that really quick. Let's say I were to be involved in a collision yesterday, and I contacted my insurer through maybe a digital channel, through the mobile app. I reported my first notice of loss. The insurer knows now that I've had a collision. Maybe it was bad enough that I had to visit the hospital or so on and so on. But then the next day, or maybe a week later, I reach out to my agent for something unrelated to the claim. And I call my agent and say, hey, I needed to ask you about fill in the blank, right? Does my agent pick up the phone knowing that I had that claim? And do they do the human thing, right? To say, okay, I know that you were just in a collision. Are you okay? Is your family okay? You have rental coverage. Did we get you set up with your rental vehicle? How's your claim going? Without me even mentioning the claim. The thing about that is kind of a good example of a great seamless experience. I've interacted with my insurer via digital channel. I told them something that's very pertinent to my auto insurance experience. And then maybe a day or two or a week later, I'm talking to a different channel. Do they do the right thing and recognize that you just had the moment of truth experience with us? There might have been injuries. You were in the hospital. Your vehicle looks like it's been totaled. Are you guys okay? Have we taken care of our commitment to you? Have we gotten you a rental vehicle? That is a great example of a seamless cross-channel experience versus I'm calling my agent and the agent's like, all right, what do you want? What do you need done? And think about that experience, right? Like, you don't know I just had a claim last week. You don't know I just got out of the hospital and you're my insurer. I told you that a week ago. And the agent's, well, you didn't tell me. No, but I told you, the insurance company. Like, think about how different that experience would be and why it drives retention, why it drives satisfaction. But I'm sure Craig can elaborate even more on how agents can play a role there.
Yeah, and I think it's a great illustration. And you think about, when you think about seamless channels, but also there's this concept of, if omni-channel, that's all the channels are available, as you mentioned, but they may not all be the right channel. And so where do I start? Oftentimes, if I have something complex or something that I think the right channel is that agent, I still have an expectation they're going to know things, like you said. And so I think there's this critical kind of dynamic that, you know, it's both having that information available, but also using it. So as an agent, what is the process? Do you have the operational and structural processes to share that information, to communicate and educate folks to use that? Because like you said, Steve, that experience happens, they might have that information, but if it's not shared, that person perceives it as not being seamless. So I think there's a lot of complexity in this concept, which is I've got to both have the data and information and infrastructure to be able to be seamless, but I also have to capitalize on it, because too often what happens is information comes in, but I don't use it, and the customer just assumes you don't have it. So if you don't say, hey, I noticed you had a claim, I know something happened to you, they don't acknowledge it. They just go on their merry way and do whatever immediate need was presented to them. Oftentimes that the customer is not in that moment going to say, well, why didn't you ask me about that? But in their brain, they're acknowledging, you should know this. How do you not know that? How do you not kind of capture that critical part of our relationship and apply it to our situation? So I think there's a dynamic that we see, particularly as it applies to the agent. I mean, that's that, moments of truth are as you said, are really critical, but particularly that human interaction. That's, oftentimes you reach out to the human because you don't believe that you can get it done online, or the call center doesn't seem like the right place to go. So you go to that person who truly owns the relationship in your mind, the person you trust. How they are, empowered to take care of you is going to really impact how they feel about you as an agent, but also the company more broadly. What's that level of trust we know is incredibly important. And the other key thing, think about, in an insurance experience, it's not a high touch experience typically. I mean, like I'm not looking at my insurance account every week. I'm not talking to my agent every other day. I'm not going to, you think about a banking experience or a credit card. I look at my statements. I'm seeing where, where's the money going? I'm going to go to the branch, make a deposit. There's lots of activities and interaction opportunities. That's not the case for an insurer. It's much less frequent. So if you get it wrong and you make it really clunky, you don't get a second shot at that. And that's, I think, the other critical thing, why it's so impactful, why it's so important in insurance in particular, is you don't get that many opportunities. And if you fail, that's going to impact both customers' perceptions, but also their future behavior. How do they give your website a second chance if it fails? If the call center is poorly performing, how are they going to act and behave in the future? That costs you money, time, resources, things like that. So it's a really impactful thing, both from a customer experience, but also from how you run the business.
So thanks, Craig. So just maybe a point of clarification, in our research, when we're talking to consumers and asking about their seamless customer experience when it comes to service, are we talking about a series of interactions with the insurer over time and across different channels over a period of days and weeks, or are we talking about a single journey where there's a particular problem that needs to be resolved or a question that needs to be answered, and they have to start with one channel and go to the other? Or are we talking about both?
I think we're talking about both. It can manifest either in the micro scale, where I need to get this question answered, and am I talking to different channels to get it? And it can be the macro scale. I'm one example of where things can go wrong, Mike. So maybe last month I made my premium payment via a mobile app, and the mobile app was willing to accept a credit card payment. And then the next month I go into my agent to ask a question. I said, well, while I'm here, I'll just pay my premium. They said, well, we don't take credit card payments right here at the agency. Well, so that's not one transaction. Those two things were a month apart, but that's more the macro scale of the longer term experience also needs to be seamless across transactions. So I think about my insurer as my insurer. Why do you take a credit card payment here but not over here, right? So, but obviously also in that more micro scale of, I need to understand why my premium went up. I just got my renewal notice. It went up 25%. I need to know now, right? And I go to my mobile app and it doesn't answer why. So then I call the contact center and they give me kind of a generic answer. Then I finally call my agent. Do I get a seamless cross-channel experience for that one simple transaction I'm trying to do right now? It manifests both ways.
Does the sequencing of the channels make a difference in terms of perception of seamlessness? So you start with the app and then you move to the agent, or you start with the agent and move to the app. Does that have an impact?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that, man. I think certainly, yeah, and Steve, you can speak more on the AIS data, but certainly I would almost call that an opti channel. I'm going to go to the channel first that I think is going to be best suited to meet my needs and matches up to my preferences. To the extent that fails, my expectation has been missed. So I think that's a critical part of, something simple. I expect to be able to update my address online. I don't need to call someone to make that change. So I go in and it fails. That has missed my expectations. So I think there's an alignment to something very complex. I need a detailed answer about my, like what coverage is right for me. And I really want to talk to someone. I'm probably going to go to an agent first. I may not bother with online, depending on my preferences. So I think there's a dynamic of what am I trying to accomplish? What do I believe is possible or should be possible via that channel? So that starts to play in, and we see that in the data start to play out that, again, how does it align to, and it's also an effort. So, again, going online is pretty low effort. picking up the phone is more effort. So oftentimes, again, I want to call you, but I got to take time out of my day to do that. I can go surf online while I'm doing other things. Not a big deal. But I think that's some of the dynamic that goes on in terms of impacting that view of seamlessness and ease of use.
Yeah, and I'll build on that with auto insurance study data. There's not a tremendous impact based on what channel you start in, but there is some noticeable impact, Mike, to your question of if you start in a mobile app and then you have to cross into other channels to get the answer to your question or to get your address changed, right? That's viewed as more seamless than if you started at the agent and then had to cross channels. And I think if you just take a half step back from that, it makes sense, right? If I talk to an agent, my personal representative, my advocate for my policy, they should be able to handle my question. If I then have to cross channels, it's not very seamless to me. If I start with the mobile app, I maybe have a different set of expectations. The mobile app might not be able to answer every question or perform every service. So then if I have to cross, I'm a little bit more forgiving to my insurer and more likely to say that, okay, it was a seamless transaction having started the mobile app and went across to a different channel.
All right, so then just to kind of finish up here, for the brands and the insurance carriers who are looking to improve the level of the seamless experience for service, what are some of the areas they should be looking at? What initiatives should they be investigating or even kicking off? Are there any kind of simple, straightforward tips and tricks that they can use?
I'll start real quick with it. Because so many of the transactions these days are starting in digital channels, it really starts with the technology, the backbone of the technology. Can the channels communicate with each other? So in the example we gave earlier, if I reported my claim through a digital channel, does my agent know of it? The agent won't know if the technology platform isn't there to share that information with the agency or with the contact center so they know. And many insurers are dealing with legacy systems that don't communicate across channels. They were built in a world that's very different from today, and they're built for a channel. They're not built for cross-channel experiences. So really starting at that technology backbone, do we have the technological capabilities for everything the customer is doing with us to be shared across the other channels the customer can use? And then once you have that, enabling the policies and procedures that make sure that the different channels are now leveraging that technology, that you don't just have the capability, but you're using it. So it's difficult in a world like we have today where insurers are a lot of their systems were built decades ago. We have a system built for agents. You contact us through a mobile app. That wasn't even considered when we built this system. That information doesn't get shared with agents. So starting there and then building it out and enabling and incentivizing the different channels to use that information.
So Craig, what are some of the best practices for brands or insurance carriers who are looking to improve the seamlessness of the customer experience? Anything that they should be focused on? Any kind of tips or tricks for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, Steve mentioned technology, and that's critical. You got to have the capabilities in place to be able to share information and have consistency. There's also processes and procedures that are really critical. And so, I think you want to have a clear kind of process and coordination, because one of the most important things is consistency. Consistency in information, consistency in answers, so that someone doesn't feel like I go to one channel, get one answer, go to another, get another answer, and there's inconsistency. And then I have to select which place to go. You want that to be there. And the other is just best practices in training and basic capabilities. Training people to, when a simple case of seamlessness is I go through your automated phone system, I give you information about my account, and then someone picks up the phone, how they're trained to acknowledge that information sharing. But then also, if it's security questions you have to ask, acknowledging they've provided you the account information, you have that, but for their security, you're going to ask them some additional questions. Seems simple, but oftentimes it's really frustrating when someone thinks, I just spent 2 minutes giving you my account number and all this information, and you don't have it, and you're just asking me the same information. So I think those are some of the basic tips, tricks, techniques to make sure that it's not just you actually have that information, but also you communicate and educate the individual that you have it and are using it to their benefit.
Just out of curiosity, does the consumer awareness of channels have an impact here in terms of their perception of the seamlessness of cross-channel experience.
I would say, I mean, absolutely. I think that's a great point to bring up because oftentimes what happens is, the consumer might believe there's a channel available to them, but they don't know. They don't know how to get there easily. And so, they're going to go path of least resistance. If you might have a mobile app, but they're not going to spend a lot of time trying to find it, track it down. So there's an opportunity where education up front, that onboarding of new customers, that's a place where you can let them know and re-communicate what are the best ways, what are the fastest, simplest, easiest ways to work with you. So I think that's a critical piece of the puzzle is what you have and reinforcing what you have that's available can really prevent them from trying to go down a path that is not going to be fruitful for that customer.
And I'll just add in some data from our auto insurance study, Mike, that confirms that, that if the customer's aware of the different communication channels available to them, they're more satisfied and they're more likely to renew their policy with the insurer than if they don't really know what options are available to them.
Well, that was a great conversation about the seamless customer experience when it comes to service. It's a new important KPI coming out of this year's auto insurance satisfaction study. We talked about what it means. We talked about its importance. We talked about what good looks like, and we even finished up with some call to action in terms of tips and tricks and initiatives for brands that are looking to improve the seamlessness of the customer experience across channels. So, Steve and Craig, thanks so much for joining us today.
Once again, great to be here. Thanks, Mike.
And we want to thank our listeners as well. I'm Michael Vermillion with JD Power, and we'll see you next time.